Pagaidzi, redzēt šito te. Te ir divlais. Kas tur ir? Smird viss šeit. Pagaid, šeit. Redzēt, šitāds kadrs vēl nekad neredzējis. Mums jātiem. Pagaidi. Bļa, te viss ir reāli. Te viss reāli. Ej, divlais, bļa, kas tad ir? Viss objektīvs pielīs ir. Jānoslāk kaut kā nost. Ja te kaut kas ir gāzies. Ej, divlais. Tu redz reāli, sos ir pa bederi. Un es paliekšu atrast to geinu vaļā. Es varu redzēt, kurš var. Ej, divas. Tā bederi milzīgi. Vienkārši tā bederi milzīgi. Man jā, viss pat tumšs. Es uzgriežu līdz galā. Es paiešu tālu, tu redzēji. Tā izskatās.
Bet tur ir tas meteorīts iekšā vai tas?
Es nezinu, kas tur nogāzās. Šobrīd viss ir pārāk tumšs, bet paskaties, cik liels. Paskaties, cik liels apmērs. Paskaties, ej, divās, man jāatkāpjas pilnīgā.
Tā nebija nekāda lidmašīna, tas bija kaut kāds.
Ko lai dara? Ko mēs darīsim? Tur jau kaut kas deg. Jānotīk ātri. Nost, jānotīk.
Es nezinu, vai nāk tur, ko darām.
Pagaid, tu līdzi. Jāzvan kaut kam, bet kam lai zvan? Šis ģets. Pagaidi.
112.
Vai, pagaid, zvani.
You know, we in the Flat Earth community are often asked a lot of questions. And one of those usually ends up being, what about meteorites? And, you know, the thing about meteorites is they are one of the many tools that the establishment uses to concrete in people's minds that the Earth is billions of years old, that there is a universe in every direction around us, and that it is also billions of years old. And it's the same establishment that tells you that dinosaur bones confirm that. It's the same establishment that tells you that space travel is real, and that the Earth is a ball, and that your vote counts. And so meteorites are just another one of those tools. And in fact, meteorites are almost the number one thing that they say they have confirmed the Big Bang Theory with. Funny enough, it's still a theory, even though they say that meteorites have confirmed it. And so my answer to these folks who have asked what about meteorites is that they are a hoax, and they have just as much science involved in meteorites as they do about paleontology and about space travel. They have a whole science built up about it. But at the end of the day, meteorites are mostly valued by the story that is accompanied with them. More so than their content of their substance in general. Most collectors buy them based on the story that is attached to them. And I'll probably have to show those in part 2 because I have way too many tabs to get through in this half hour here. So the reason I say they're hoaxes is there's been many hoaxes of meteorites. This one in particular was a hoax. And not only are the ones that are declared hoaxes, but I say that all the stories are. Because you'll notice that most meteorites land in the middle of nowhere. Alright? When you or anyone you know goes outside every day, or even when you're hanging out in your home, or asleep in your bed, or driving your car, you have zero concern for a meteorite ever suddenly crashing through your body in a split second, going 10 times the speed of a bullet. It would just punch right through you and you'd die from bleeding out within a few moments. No one that you know is ever concerned about a meteorite suddenly punching right through them. And the reason why none of you ever concern yourselves with that is because we never see any such thing. Alright? No one you know has ever watched meteorites come from space and physically hit the ground. And no one you know has not only watched those things hit the ground, but walked right over to them and picked them up. Alright? You believe that that happens all over the world because of the media. Alright? But media and scientific organizations are the ones that tell you these stories. And like I said, most of these land in the middle of nowhere, you know, some desolate area that you could never really access with, you know, without really spending a lot of money and a lot of your means and effort to go hunt these places down. And yeah, there are a few reportings here in the United States, a couple a year, but those people always seem to, for whatever reason, either have a vested interest, or if you dig into their current events of their life or their history, you'll find that there's something shady about them, that they were either have a criminal background, or the ones that seem legit have no history of being in that town. Or, and in fact, one that I looked up actually was way behind on his mortgage payments, and he was actually going through negotiations with the company to put a halt on their process of foreclosing on his home. And wouldn't you know, a meteorite crashed right through his home, and he became a news sensation, and he was paid pretty generously for his meteorite, and he was able to save his home. So, the stories just don't add up. When you start looking into them, they don't add up. These people are actors. It's the same deal as the people who do these low production dinosaur bone discoveries that we covered in the other videos. These are low production, low cost productions that are filmed and then put in the news and put in a couple of journals here and there, and everyone accepts them as fact. And you do as well. I have all my life as well, until I actually started looking into these stories offered by these. And then I also observed that collectors, that whole collector world of them, is more interested in the story attached to the meteorite than its composition. So, like I said, this one is a crater from the video you just watched. And it was a hoax. This crater is a hoax. It was man-made. And it's already public knowledge that it's a hoax. And the funny thing about hoaxes are they're not always put on by a couple of guys that are fans of sci-fi or whatever. Sometimes major companies put on these hoaxes. This particular hoax was put on by a multi-million-dollar Swedish-based telecommunications company. And they did this to gain publicity for a new marketing campaign they were about to kick off, according to them. So have yourself a read if you like. You'll notice that the entire story is riddled with code. You know, it was 66 feet in diameter, 3 meters or 9 feet deep, 33 feet deep in some places. And of course, you know, the fire department, police, military units, a bunch of scientists worldwide had their phones ringing and were packing their bags to come to this place. You know the Vatican already had a few scientists on their way, I'm sure. And because you know how the RCC rolls. And so this, because it wasn't put on by the establishment, you know, they quickly, openly declared it to be a hoax. And You know, this came with its own elaborate video, you know, that looked very amateur and sudden, spur of the moment footage. And all of this was just a way to push the believability of this hoax. And they don't even exactly know, the scientists, these brilliant scientists that came and checked everything out and declared it to be a hoax, don't even know exactly how they pulled it off. And you would think they would have got the perpetrators to admit how they did it, as far as like the flame down at the bottom and the composition of the stuff they used to do it. But yeah, so that was a hoax. And there's been plenty others declared hoaxes that weren't put on by the establishment. So let's review what the largest meteorite known to man is. It's called the Hoba meteorite. And when you look at it here, you think, man, look at that crater around it. But did you know that this actually did not leave a crater whatsoever? And, you know, we're often shown big craters, like this one here, Meteor crater they call it. It's a huge crater in Arizona, and they declare that this was created from a meteorite impact. Now, there have been reports of up to hundreds of pounds of samples of the meteorite that supposedly caused this crater. But ask yourself, where is the big chunk of the meteorite? There's not one piece. And of course they say, well, it pulverized, you know, it hit with such force that it pulverized. Well, nonsense. If this hole is this gigantic, right, because of something large enough to create such a hole, after all, it doesn't matter that it's just hauling butt. It also has to be humongous while it's hauling butt to make an impact that would cause a crater this massive. Alright? And there is not one piece of it. You could go there and walk around all day at this crater, and you're not going to find a piece of this supposed meteor anywhere. And so, when you look at the largest meteorite known to man, and then you read the story about it, it starts becoming more clear how these are hoaxes, or that they certainly appear to be. Now, my contention is that these giant meteorites are nothing more than slag from the railroad industries, from the booming industrial era. Their iron was a huge thing. Steel, huge thing in the industrial age, and many factories were built. Lots of slag was generated. Think of all the railroads that go all over the countries. You know, they generated lots of slag they call ballast. And, you know, all these refineries, they dump trainfuls of slag into the ground, and then they bury over it with dirt, and it ends up forming all these random shapes. And so the story behind this one is that this farmer was plowing his field, okay? And you think Nambia, this is not a place you would expect to see a hoax be portrayed. But remember, we discussed that most of these are out in the middle of nowhere. And so this guy supposedly was plowing his field when his plow, not the tractor, his plow suddenly screeched to a halt. Curious about what he had run into, he dug into the soil. Now, this field he was plowing was not a crater, okay? And he had to dig into the ground to find this large piece of metal. And the photos of it from back then, you can see plain as day, there is no field being plowed. All right, this is not a field. There are trees and brush laying around, or scattered around everywhere. Do you see rows of a plowed field? There is no field here. All right, and so this was put here by some steel manufacturing company or some refinery, and then the fellows in the craft turned it into a meteorite find, and they gave this poor farmer the props. Same thing you hear about with the dinosaur stuff, like I showed on Dinosaurs Part 2, some lowly farmer guy, and he gets all the credit for finding it, when really it was put there and the whole thing is a hoax. So there's no field here. He wasn't just cruising down a row of his field and his plow just hit this and brought him to a halt. There's no field here. And there hasn't been for years. Look at this brush. Look at this tree. Look at everything around. There is no field here. And when you look at, when people come to visit this, they see this crater looking thing around it. They think to themselves, surely they're standing in the crater that this meteorite made. But if it was that humongous, it would most likely make a huge crater, like we saw in Meteor Crater in Arizona. So the excuse for this one not leaving a crater whatsoever was that it came in at low velocity. So of course NASA always has an excuse for why observation does not match their theories. Well, let's have a look at some numbers on this guy, huh? It was declared to be 66 tons. Alright, so there's your 66. It's 9 feet by 9 feet by 3 feet thick. So there's your 66 again, used in the form of nines. 3 feet thick. They love their 3. 3 times 12, of course, is obviously 36 for your 3 sixes. By 12, I mean inches, 3 feet. Of course, they say it landed 80,000 years ago, even though it was 6 inches under the dirt. And so, no crater? Oh yeah, because it came in at low velocity. What a crock! Alright, so this one's a hoax. And this is the largest one known to man. Left no crater. You never see anyone sticking a magnet to it. And keep that in mind for the end of the video, and you'll see why I say that. Here's another photo of them. And you see they're standing, of course the dirt is built up around the hole. So the ground level is not 2 feet higher than where they're standing on top of it. It was actually only a few inches under the dirt. And so that proves that it was just placed there. Was dug out and was buried over, then they just dug it back out, took photos of themselves standing on it. This is a hoax. The ground level is only about 6 inches higher than the top of that thing. Certainly would be deeper than that and would have made a crater if it had done that, if it had landed 80,000 years ago from space. But, funny enough, even though people see giant craters like this and never ask themselves where the gigantic meteorite that should be laying in the center of it, one man wasn't fooled, and he happened to be what he's known now to be the greatest geologist, or at least one of the greatest geologists that ever lived. Grove Carl Gilbert declared, after studying it extensively, that this crater is nothing more than a volcanic steam explosion. Alright, and there are such things as flat volcanoes. And so this is nothing more than some type of steam release that happened, and then there was a void afterward, which this earth fell down into, much like a sinkhole kind of thing. And so this guy right here is one of the most brilliant, most renowned geologists that ever lived, declaring that, according to his findings, it's nothing more. Now, they tell you up here in the story that hundreds of pounds of this meteor have been collected. Alright? Have yourself a read. Notice the hole is square. You know? So there's no like coming in at an angle kind of shape to it, where how it got hit or any of that. And you'll notice most craters are square or round, and you would think when you see them come through the sky, they're not going vertical toward the earth. When you see fire in the sky, it's not coming vertical directly down toward earth like a skydiver falling straight down. Instead, it's fire you see cruising across the sky. Now, if that was to keep that type of vector and then hit the ground, it would hit it at an angle, and it would cause a teardrop shaped hole, if you will. Wouldn't cause a perfect square hole or a perfect round hole. And none of these craters that are attributed to meteorites ever have a meteorite in them, but they declare that they do, and that they've found hundreds of samples. Alright, I'm going to keep scrolling here so eventually you can read the spot where it says that they've picked up all kinds of pieces of this meteorite from it. So they tell you here the meteorite was mostly vaporized. What? And leaves a hole this big? You cannot have it both ways. If it vaporized, it wouldn't be able to leave a hole this big. And vice versa. So, you know, according to these folks, they have gathered all kinds of samples. But flying in the face of them supposedly collecting over 600 samples is the wisest geologist known to mankind, who ignored all of that and declared it's just a volcanic steam explosion. So, this is a replica. This lady probably thinks she's posing with an actual meteorite, but it is a replica. And there is an entire industry of replicas for meteorites. This one is a replica as well. You can sit on your table. It's about the size of a baseball. Alright? But the supposed real one is many tons and very huge. And I want you to observe the giant cavities all over this thing. Remember that, and remember what I mentioned a little while ago about them not ever sticking a magnet to the Hoba meteorite. Remember both of those things for the end of this video. This is another replica of the same replica I just showed you, only a much larger version of it. This is a full scale or half scale, I can't remember. It's either full scale or half scale size replica of the one they declare is real. Here's a child sitting in it. Of course, she probably has been convinced that this is real, and her parents probably think it is too. And its name is the Willamette Meteorite, and you'll notice this is also a replica of it, and it doesn't look anything like it. Oh man, but this is a replica also. And of course these are at museums. You know, the same place where they show you replica Mona Lisas, replica dinosaur bones. You know, and my whole problem with these museums, this newfound type of museum that all these have turned into, where they're actually just a house of replicas. Now, call me crazy, but in my opinion, the point of a museum, for it to be a real museum, is that people go to that location, pay money to enter, and they ought to expect to see genuine examples of history and of humankind's study and discovery and whatnot. And instead, every museum now is chocked full of replicas of things. Not just dinosaur bones. They have replicas of everything, including meteorites. And that ought to make people raise an eyebrow, you know? You can order a replica Mona Lisa on Amazon right now. Okay? And then when it gets here, you can put it in a nice fancy frame and you can hang it on your wall. Does that make your house a museum? Do you have the right now to start charging people and name your house a museum and charge people to come and admire your fake Mona Lisa? What is going on? So here's some history about this thing. Have yourself a read if you wish. Of course, it's 32,000 pounds. So there's your 32. And, you know, I'm not just saying these things are hoaxes because I disagree with the establishment. They are hoaxes. And there's replicas made of them all over the place. Just like dinosaur bones. I'm just cruising through this quickly so that you could pause and read if you like. Replicas, see? And there's plenty of replicas. There's another one at another museum of the same one we're talking about. It's only about 2-3 feet tall. But I mean, look at this display they made for it, you know? All this masonry, this stonework, you know? Kids and parents come to museums and they see something like this and they feel like they have seen a meteorite from space with their own eyes. Of course, this one here was on a gentleman's farm, of course, and he found it and he brought it to his front porch and he used it for 30 years on his front porch to cure meat on. 220 pounds, there's your 22. 30 years he had it, worth $5.3 million, you know? Get out of here. Bet you this guy's broke as a joke right now if you looked him up. Bet he's not swimming in that $5 million. Oh, what was that word down toward the bottom there? Oh. Nice. Replica, huh? How about that? So, here's another picture of that. And of course this just looks like where when slag is being poured on top of itself where it's already landed on the ground, you know, if you just turn this 90, slag would be coming vertical down to here, landing here, spilling out in every direction. And as it cools, it just hardens that way. It's nothing more than industrial slag. This is a crater. Absolutely gargantuan crater. And, you know, there's no meteorite in the middle of this thing, anywhere. And grass grows all over the bottom of it in its caldera. Here's another meteorite hoax. Port Ordford. Have yourself a read. And I have a lot more to show you, but you know, it's just taken us the whole half hour to get going this far. I have probably 50, 60 more tabs of things. Here is the Amsterdam meteorite hoax. Have yourself a read there. And so, here's another meteorite that a piece of it was discovered to be a hoax. It took 98 years for that piece to be discovered as a hoax. And this guy here put his own career on the line. He's from NASA. He claimed that the meteorite contained fossils, some of which are known to belong to Earth. So, there goes the idea of that thing being from space. There's another meteorite hoax. This was put on by a company. This here is a replica of a meteorite. And in part 2, I'm going to get into the stories behind some of these popular ones that are for sale in pieces right now, of modern day stories, modern fallings, or hammers as they call them when they strike things man-made. And my point about this video is that meteorites are what they use to declare the Big Bang is true, and that the universe is billions of years old, and that space is every bit the way they say it is. And my contention is it's nothing more than slag and railroad ballast, which is also slag. From the industrial era, Freemasons started using these things and dumping them in different places, and then they would just dig them up a few days later, just like they were doing with dinosaur bones. All of these were discovered in the early 1900s, late 1800s, mid 1800s. So I've only got a few seconds here, but I'll get into a part 2, and we're going to get into why what I stated in the beginning for you to memorize. I'm not going to be able to hit it because I don't have enough time now, so just come back for part 2 and I'll explain why I said they've never put a magnet around the Hoba, and why you need to remember that other one has giant cavities in it. This is all slag.